So I was watching a Channel 4 news show today, and they ended with a piece on young men being influenced by social media influencers and how some of them have been turned into the dark web and being misguided and led astray by these said social media influencers with some of the usual names like Andrew Tate and various others being thrown out there, and not in a positive light neither. Now, the lady being interviewed by another lady brought up several constructive points amongst many points I thought was very non-helpful and non-constructive. The main thing that rubbed me the wrong way watching this interview, which unfortunately I can't find the clip to show you, so I just kind of verbalize it as best I can, was how they kind of seemed to show, although they might have been willing to do otherwise, they seemed to show a kind of huge lack of understanding of the very said people they were talking about, which is the young men in question, who may be struggling these days with their identity and various other things, so they say in the news media. I mean, the whole issue is largely to do with comments that have recently been made. For example, Gareth Southgate, ex-British England football manager, made a statement recently, and they kind of referenced this statement to a large degree. Before getting into that, though, I just want to wrap up by saying what really rubbed me the wrong way watching this interview was you got two females talking about young men and kind of suggesting what they could do to help them and what they are doing wrong, but from a female's perspective, without quite realizing they're giving a female perspective. As in, it sounded more like this is what they would offer up to young girls, as opposed to understanding how young men think and experience the world. Well, this is the comment Gareth Southgate made recently. So he says, this is taken from The Guardian, by the way. So it's Gareth Southgate rails against callous toxic influences in Thimbleby lecture. So Gareth Southgate expressed his concern that callous, manipulative and toxic influences are taking the place of traditional father figures in society and contributing to mental health issues amongst young men. The former England manager also questioned whether winning a trophy is the only marker of success after losing in successive European Championship final. As he delivered the prestigious Richard Dimbleby lecture on Tuesday, Southgate followed in footsteps of an illustrious group of academics, artists, entrepreneurs and members of the royal family who have delivered the annual lecture since its inception in 1972. In memory of the veteran broadcaster who died in 1965, entitled The Beautiful Game. Building belief and resilience in a young generation, he began by going back to his missed penalty in the shootout against Germany at Euro 96 and explained how it became a turning point in his life. Southgate then talks about how he has spent the past few months visiting community centres, schools and even prison as he attempts to find out more about what he calls the unrelenting impact of social media. Now, at least I can say for Sir Gareth Southgate is he's a guy, so he's going to give his opinion and perspective from a male point of view. I find it very difficult, and I've been and kind of growing to believe that some of the actual causes of what is described as a problem with young men trying to navigate, and find their place in society these days, part of that is caused not just by not having male role models in the house, because they say young men are more likely to have a smartphone in their home than a male role model. So they say, I think it's partly to do with the fact that these young dudes are growing up in probably female dominated households. And I mean, who knows what positions they hold in the pecking order of these said households. And at a young age where there's enough things you're tackling, whatever your gender, having to find how to navigate. And also, it's more or quite a commonly known thing that, for young men going through a difficult time, unless the examples and the role models out in the world are generally celebrities, rock stars, rappers, footballers, athletes, and a very small percentage of high value males, which, the majority, I guess, tend to aspire towards. And that's going to leave young men with, goals that are not always achievable. And everyone's attracted generally to the glamorous side of things. So that's not just limited to young men. So you're in an era where, we've had 10 years of wokeness, and even in Hollywood, movies are being remade where the leading lady is now the key figure, beating up a room of 20 geezers or something like that. And everything's been sort of exaggerated, often in a very unrealistic way. It's almost like society is telling young men that you ain't really that important, you ain't really meant to be, utilizing your natural, it's testosterone fueled maleness as you grow and learn how to handle yourself and those around you. And we're in an era where males are generally encouraged to be feminized. We're in the era of the feminized male. So I won't blame all of these negative perceptions on the manosphere and some of the, influencers that are quite popular amongst the young dudes who are looking for a direction, particularly when not the misogyny side of things, particularly when they encourage looking after yourself, going out in the world and trying to build something for yourself. Don't expect it to come to you on a plate. Don't expect to reap rewards that you ain't sowed no seeds for. I think that stuff is positive. All we tend to hear about in the media is the negative, toxic masculinity, which I think is a made up word to a large extent. Where's the toxic femininity? So we hear a lot about misogyny, where's the misandry? Half the young dudes and young females probably don't even know what that word means. So it's a very skewed and unbalanced era. And as I've heard some people say on the internet, some certain commentators, we're probably living through an era of very low male testosterone, where a lot of the male figures in general that we see in the world, particularly in the media, I won't say lacking testosterone, but that's what they would say. And I find it hard to disagree at times. Even in the world of politics, someone like Mr. Trump, President Trump, who's always been, knocked for being having a tough guy type persona or whatever, that is constantly being presented as that's negative, that's bad, it's not this, it's not that. And that's a large part of the world we're living in. So, to what's causing some of the confusion, I believe, amongst a lot of the young dudes and young men, is there's a definite attempt to feminize them. And that goes against their natural instincts as they grow. So, of course, it's going to cause some kind of confusion. Anyway, I digress. So, to follow on with this Southgate statement, it reads, building belief and resilience in a young generation, he began by going back to his missed penalty in the shootout against Germany at Euro 96 and explained how it became a turning point in his life. Southgate then talks about how he has spent the past few months visiting community centre schools and, oh yeah, I read this bit, and even the prison. He attempts to find out more about what he calls the unrelenting impact of social media. There's one topic that keeps being brought to my attention, and it's parents who keep raising it. Southgate said, young men are suffering. They are feeling isolated. They're grappling with their masculinity, with their broader place in society. He believes the decline in communities and lack of mentors or father figures are causing more young men to become reluctant to talk or express their emotions. I don't know if that was ever a thing anyway, although during this woke era, it's promoted as that's what young men are supposed to be doing. In some cases, it might cause more harm than good in the wrong context. You know, I don't know. If there's ever an era where guys were supposed to be walking around being emotional, that leads to some very difficult situations, shall we say. Anyway, let's continue. And this void, I'll just cut back a bit. They spend more time online searching for direction and falling into unhealthy alternatives like gambling, gaming, and pornography, Southgate said. And this void is filled by a new kind of role model who do not have their best interests at heart. These are callous, manipulative, and toxic influences whose sole drive is for their own gain. They willingly trick young men into believing that success is measured by money or dominance, never showing emotion, and that the world, including women, is against them. They are as far away as you could possibly get from the role models our young men need in their lives. Southgate, who left his post with England after the defeat by Spain in the final Euro 24, has called on society to help create more leaders that can set the right tone. He referred to Harry Kane and Jordan Henderson, the latter who was surprisingly recalled by Thomas Tuchel for his first England squad last week as players who helped to instill new pride in the national team. They were role models I wanted others to emulate, he said. And over time, we created a culture where players were encouraged to take ownerships, where young players were welcomed, not treated as outsiders, and where mistakes weren't ridiculed, but were seen as part of a process. And so it is in society. We need leaders to set the right tone, to be the role models we want for our young men. We have to show young men that character is more important than status, that how you treat others is more important than how much money you make. And it follows on, just to finish off here, he says, Southgate also argued that winning silverware is only one measure of achievement in sport. If I've learned anything from my life in football, it's that success is about much more than the final score. It isn't a straight line, and it's not a single moment, he said. That's definitely true. Not everyone will win trophies, not everyone will be at the top of their field, but everyone can live a life where they can constantly strive to improve, where they can look back and say, I gave it my best. I stayed true to myself, and I made the difference. That is real success. So, there you go. That's what Gareth Southgate, Sir, let me rephrase that. Sir Gareth Southgate said recently, and it came up in this Channel 4 interview with this female screenwriter who felt that young men should have more mental health groups set up to help guide them and give them support. They should be more emotional. They should have more male role models. I'm guessing they mean of the kind that they approve of. There are role models out there in the world. And they should be kept away from the dark web and other places that they may spend their time seeking information, knowledge, and other pursuits. Yes, there's some truths in that. Yeah, it's kind of sad that when effort is made to look at this subject and, with a desire to show support for the young dudes and the young men, it's coming primarily from a female perspective and not from a male's point of view who will understand other young men in a more, real, say, intimate, true to life way. Because I think, like I said earlier, part of the problem I do believe is young men being raised almost to be females, from females who may not be intending to do harm, although they are translating their view and, kind of putting it on young men who move and navigate, even biologically, function in a different way. So something's bound to go wrong. And I think that is one of the sources of the confusion. The solution is partly causing the problem. And now, yeah, I would acknowledge there is some misdirection out there. Not everything in the manosphere is kosher and correct. And some things are, put out there by people with exaggerated views and extreme ideas. Anyone with common sense, though, and balance will, you can tell something is kind of pushing over that direction or more over that direction, unless in the center to an extent. So some of the people who were kind of like hated as the problems rather than the solutions, I think that some of them are doing some good. If you just take off the not the stuff that wants to be used to paint a bad picture of some of these influences, you take off the positive and you focus on that and maybe give that some oxygen, you'll see they're saying to guys, get up from your behind. Maybe if you ain't happy with your lot, do something about it. Keep physically fit because it helps, mind and matter, the balance. Go out into the world, try and build something for yourself, because there is an aspect of the male role, whatever era we're looking at where, there's a builder aspect, whether you want to look at tropes or otherwise. Many males, females build, but generally in society, hunter-gatherer, not so much that men are still required to be the builders in many aspects of society. So, some of these influences are kind of like a point in those directions, saying, get up, look after yourself, strive for what it is you want to achieve. Don't put your time into trying to get nowhere. If you have an opportunity, use it and at least make an attempt to do something for yourself. Don't be waiting for somebody to come and do it for you. Those things, they might not be easy solutions. The easy solution isn't always the right one in general. So I'd say that some of these things are quite positive. Just want to take a minute to have a word from our sponsors. Now, if you're based in the UK and you've ever tried getting money paid when it's been owed to you by an organization or by work you've done, or maybe it's just a rent deposit you're trying to reclaim, you can get to a point where you're just at the end of your tether. So if you have solutions, look up smalldebts.co.uk and they'll have your back. They'll get that money back for you and put you at ease. Check them out.
Get your security deposit back or dealing with unfair charges? At Small Debts, our tenant advocate service fights to get your money back. No stress, no hassle. Take control today. Visit smalldebts.co.uk and start your case now.
There you go. So, there was... Wait a minute, give me a moment. There was something I came across earlier. Now, it chimes in with what I was just talking about, and I think they actually refer to Gareth Southgate as well on this show. So let's just have a little look and see if they can shed some light on this subject matter.
Let's move to this story. As we've been talking a little bit already, Gareth Southgate has warned that young men are being exploited by toxic influencers promoting harmful ideologies. This was the Richard Dimbleby lecture. It's a kind of an annual thing. This is the former England manager said, isolation and a lack of role models leave many vulnerable figures to figure out what equates to success. Money, dominance and emotional suppression, prioritizing personal gain over well-being. So it's that material world is out there again. Let's have a listen to Mr. Southgate giving that lecture this morning.
Young men are suffering. They're feeling isolated. They're grappling with their masculinity and with their broader place in society. As real-world communities and mentorship declines, young men end up withdrawing, reluctant to talk or express their emotions. They spend more time online searching for direction and are falling into unhealthy alternatives like gaming, gambling and pornography.
That's Mr. Southgate speaking at the Richard Dimbleby lecture, which is on BBC One this evening.
So most of that is I read out earlier. So you don't have to go over that again.
10:40. With me is Daniel Guinness, co-founder and managing director of Beyond Equality. Afternoon to you, Daniel. Thank you for joining us. Your response, if you would, to Mr. Southgate's comments this morning.
I very much welcome the comments, and at the moment we're finding that there's broad agreement in the UK from all sorts of different sides of politics and spectrums of belief that we do need to have this really serious conversation about how we're raising young men and what sort of future that we're enabling them to have for themselves and enabling them to take part in for the rest of society. It's a crucial conversation.
Yeah. And is this, I mean, it seems the big focus is on screens and not just watching incessant TikTok videos, but all the other things that might go with it. That could be gaming, and that can take you into a completely different world, which is quite comfortable, particularly for young boys, because there's a community there. It can take you, as Gareth Southgate alluded to pornography, which is, can become a complete obsession and has very obvious demonstrable negative effects on that one. It can also take you into some undesirable groups and areas too. I mean, we all know what the online world can do. If you sit there for long enough with a screen, there's a high chance, I guess, you're going to fall into one of them.
Have you owned or leased a Jaguar Land Rover or Range Rover diesel vehicle between 2015 and 20?
Yeah, and certainly I think there's a lot to be said that there's a big part of the problem with this newly emerging world online that we've failed to regulate. We've failed to really understand as adults, and therefore we've really failed to actually help our young people engage with effectively. Yeah. Having said that, when you actually talk to young people, what comes out is they're using the internet in so many different ways than what you and I do, and that we actually imagine them to do so. And the ways that they're using it can be really beneficial for them. They can find connection with people. Like, I mean, if you imagine someone who's quite isolated in their own school group, maybe just take, for example, someone who's part of the LGBTQIA plus community. So young gay man, for example, and he doesn't have that connection in the real life with other people. He can find support and encourage.
This is where I think he goes off a bit, kind of slides back in the direction of what we're just departing from recently with the whole 10 years of wokeness. But, different opinions.
Online. So it's this complicated picture, which is it's positive, new connections, new information, but we really need to make sure that we're getting on top of the algorithms, and also that the sort of voices that are coming into those online spaces are also ones that are very positive and providing these messages of hope and connection that are actually good for these young people.
It's a very good point, and you're absolutely right. My little boy, he's 11. He, checks out. Every now and then he'll tell me a little fact about something. There was one just last night. I can't remember what it was. It genuinely fascinated me. I thought, how did I not know that? I said, where'd you get that? He said, I saw it on a YouTube video. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. That's what I want you to be watching. But of course, simultaneously, the next video he might stumble across, and we try to monitor it. Obviously, he's not on YouTube a lot, but it could easily be somebody getting beheaded somewhere. I don't know. That's perhaps a bit greater argument about the content of YouTube and TikTok and the like. But it is that, yes, of course, the internet and online world has opened up so many things for adults and for kids, and that's brilliant. But of course, you can very easily fall down the wrong rabbit hole.
I see he's got a very positive, well, I wouldn't say positive, but a good point there. I won't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, precisely. And I think there's a really important piece of training for young people on that social media and media literacy so that they can actually see, well, what's useful information, what's truth,
Yeah.
and what actually is just someone spouting opinions that are going to be harmful. But I think a lot of the solution has to come offline, because if we think about the experience of a young person and why they're going online and why they end up in the rabbit hole.
So I kind of wrap it up there because they kind of go up into some certain areas, and the main point that I was really wanting to focus on is just the blaming the young men and the influencers and the casting most of what they're coming across or finding to be inspired by as something negative. Talking about the dark web, misogyny, and as these dudes mentioned earlier, why not focus on some of the more positive messages that are put out there, and the more promising, useful self-help and constructive things that young men can come across online, and allow them to kind of find their own way to navigate, as most of us do on the internet, rather than just writing it all off as misleading and it must be censored and they must control what young dudes come across, and feminizing the message and trying to turn young men into young ladies. It's just not a good look or way to guide somebody. So for now, I'll just say be good, be safe, be creative. Until next time, we out.